Let's talk about something you see a million times a day, but probably never really think about: the Humble website button. It's the most basic point of interaction on any page, right? Well, we're about to see how a little inspiration from the world outside our windows can completely change the game. Seriously, go ahead, open up a few tabs. What's the one thing they all have in common? Buttons, menus, input fields, content blocks. I'm willing to bet you're looking at a sea of rectangles. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. It works, it's functional. But there's this subtle, almost clinical feeling to it all, isn't there? It kind of reminds you that you're just clicking boxes on a machine, not moving through a space that was really made for a person. And that's the feeling we're going to talk about fixing. So, why does this even matter? Why go to all the trouble? To really get why nature-inspired buttons are so powerful, we have to look at how our brains are wired. It all starts with this really cool idea called biophilia. This theory, which was popularized by the biologist E.O. Wilson, basically says we are hardwired to love nature. It's in our DNA. For thousands and thousands of years, our very survival depended on understanding natural patterns. And that ancient programming, it doesn't just shut off when we open a laptop. So when we use natural shapes, even for something as small as a button, we're scratching a deep psychological itch that makes us feel more comfortable and safe. And here's where it gets really fascinating. It's this concept called cognitive fluency. Think about it. In the wild, what do sharp geometric lines usually mean? Things like thorns, sharp rocks, maybe a predator's teeth. They signal potential danger, so our brains have to work just a tiny bit harder to process them. But soft, organic curves? Those are river stones, leaves, rolling hills. They signal safety. Our brains process them effortlessly, which actually lowers our cognitive load and just plain feels better. And here's the kicker. This isn't just some feel-good, abstract idea. This stuff translates into real-world results. Buttons that feel more natural are more interesting. They invite curiosity. That means more engagement. When you get rid of that tiny bit of subconscious friction, people are more likely to click. And maybe the biggest win of all, it changes how people see your brand. It makes you look more thoughtful, more human, and way more authentic. Okay, so that's the why. I hope you're convinced. Now for the really fun part, the what. Let's stop talking theory and start talking application. How do we actually translate these natural elements into a whole new way of thinking about buttons? First up, the most obvious one, shape. And I want you to think way beyond just rounding the corners of a rectangle. I mean, what if a button was shaped like a smooth, asymmetrical pebble you'd find on a beach? Or what about a leaf shape, where the stem could cleverly point to what it does, like for a drop-down menu? You could even use something like a honeycomb structure to create a grid of buttons that feels organic but still totally organized. Next is texture. This is how you make a button feel like something you could actually reach out and touch. A flat color just screams digital. But if we add a subtle noise filter to mimic the matte finish of slate, or use a gentle gradient to suggest wood grain, suddenly it has a physicality. It adds this rich, tangible feeling that's just so much more satisfying. Of course, we have to talk about color and light. And please, when you hear natural colors, don't just think green and brown. Think about the incredible palette of a coral reef, or the muted warm tones of a desert at sunset. And a huge key here is that almost nothing in nature is a single, flat color. So by using subtle gradients, we can show how light hits an object, giving it a real sense of volume. And swapping out those harsh black drop shadows for soft, colored ones, game changer. And finally, this is how we breathe life into our button animation. Your hover and click states are the perfect chance to give feedback that feels natural. So when a user's mouse moves over it, maybe it doesn't just change color, maybe it gives off a soft glow or pulses gently, like it's alive. And when they click, imagine an effect like a water ripple spreading out from their cursor. It's a beautiful way to confirm the action that feels so much more satisfying than a simple color change. All right, so the designers in the room are probably buzzing with ideas, but the developers may be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how in the world do I actually build it? So let's get into the nitty-gritty, the how. First things first, before you do anything fancy, you have to start with the right foundation, and that means using the right HTML. If your button does something on the page, like submit a form, use a button tag. If it takes you to a different page, use an A tag. This is absolutely fundamental for accessibility and making sure your site works for everyone. So, how do we make these cool organic shapes? Well, CSS can get you part of the way there, but for real complexity, SVGs are your best friend. The analogy here is perfect.
A PNG is like a photograph. It's made of pixels, and if you scale it up, it gets all blurry and gross. But an SVG? An SVG is like a blueprint. It's just code, a set of instructions for how to draw a shape. So it stays perfectly crisp and sharp at any size, forever.
So what does this mean for us? It means SVGs are basically our superpower. You get complete creative freedom to make any shape you can dream up. It's going to look fantastic on every screen, from a tiny phone to a huge 4K monitor. The file sizes are incredibly small, which is great for performance, and this is the best part, you can still control every piece of it with CSS for all those cool hover effects we talked about.
And the workflow to actually do this is way easier than you might think. It's really just a 3-step process. 1, draw your shape in a program like Figma or Illustrator. 2, run that exported SVG file through a free online tool like SVG-OMG. It just cleans up the code for you. And 3, paste that clean code directly into your HTML. That's it. That last step is the magic that lets CSS see inside the SVG and work its magic.
Okay, we've got the theory, we've got the tools. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility, right? You can't just start throwing these things everywhere. We have to design with purpose.
And let me be absolutely clear about this. This part is non-negotiable. A beautiful design that some people can't use is just a failed design, period. The text on your button has to have enough color contrast to be readable. People who use keyboards to navigate need a super clear, obvious focus state. And any cool texture you add can never, ever make the text on top of it hard to read.
And finally, context is everything. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Those soft, friendly pebble buttons that would be absolutely perfect for a yoga or wellness app, they'd feel completely wrong and out of place on a website for a serious financial firm. The design has to support the brand's identity. It has to echo the brand's voice and serve the core message you're trying to send. So what's the big takeaway from all this? The goal here isn't really just to make prettier buttons. It's about using these principles to shift our thinking, to stop building rigid, sterile pages, and to start cultivating digital spaces that feel more intuitive, more human, and, well, fundamentally more alive.